They say the hospitality industry is just high-end babysitting for adults who have access to heavy credit limits and a god complex. I built the Azure Coast, a boutique resort on the Florida Panhandle that caters to people who treat all-inclusive packages like a cheap insult. I didn't inherit this place or marry into money. I clawed this business out of the dirt after my first marriage blew up and dragged my catering company into financial ruin. My office sits right above the glass-walled atrium where I can watch the lobby like an eagle hunting prey. It was a chaotic Tuesday when the reservation crossed my desk. My events director, Sarah, walked in with that specific exhausted expression that usually meant a wealthy client was asking for live indoor fireworks. She dropped a heavy leather folder onto my desk with a heavy sigh. "We have an urgent request for the main ballroom during peak holiday weekend," Sarah said, leaning against the frame. "They want the top-tier package, our private cellars, and they are demanding an outside pastry maker." I did not bother looking up from my screen. "Tell them no," I replied instantly. "We have an elite pastry chef who is trying to trade exposure for free champagne this time." "That is the catch," Sarah said, tapping the contract. "It is listed as a corporate booking under Apex Synergies LLC. But the event rider explicitly calls for a bridal suite under the name Mr. Advance and a groom setup for Jordan Fields." The air in my lungs completely vanished. My heart stopped dead in my chest before restarting with a heavy, deliberate thud. Jordan Fields was my ex-fiancé. 5 years ago, he decided our catering business was a dead weight and that his young marketing intern was a better long-term investment. He did not just walk away from our relationship. He quietly liquidated our business entity behind my back, dumping the massive debt on my shoulders while he stole our client roster to launch a tech firm. Sarah stepped closer, her expression shifting to genuine concern. "Valerie, you just lost all your color. Do you know these people?" I took a deliberate sip of my cold coffee to steady my hands. "Apex Synergies is nothing but a shell company," I said, keeping my voice utterly devoid of emotion. "Jordan uses it to hide personal expenses when he does not want his investors or tax auditors prying into his lifestyle." I opened the folder and reviewed the fine print. The audacity was almost impressive. Jordan was renting my luxury resort for his upcoming wedding. When he ruined me, I was surviving in a tiny apartment that smelled like mildew. He took the cash, the reputation, and the clean slate. I moved 2 hours south, reclaimed my independence, and built this resort specifically to be the kind of venue Jordan could only dream of accessing. Did he actually know I owned this place? I double-checked the signatures on the intake sheets. The paperwork was handled entirely through a third-party wedding coordinator based out of Miami. "He has no idea," I murmured, a cold wave of realization washing over me. "He thinks this is just another anonymous luxury property. He has no clue I am the person running the entire establishment." Sarah pulled up a chair and leaned in. "Should I issue an immediate cancellation? We are technically fully booked anyway." "Oh, it is deeply personal," I replied, staring out the window at the ocean. "But we are absolutely not turning them down. If we decline, he simply takes his money to the resort down the street and lives happily ever after without ever knowing how close he came to disaster." I flipped to the back page of the master venue contract. Deep in the fine print were rules I had personally drafted years ago while sitting in an empty apartment fueled by spite and cheap wine. Clause 14 clearly stated that any party using a shell corporation to hide commercial identity or deceive management would face immediate termination of service without a refund. "Approve the contract," I instructed Sarah, handing the folder back to her. "Send them our highest grade welcome basket. The one with the imported truffle oil." "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, looking thoroughly stressed. "You are playing with fire." I smiled, though my fingers were trembling slightly from pure adrenaline. "Jordan Fields is coming right into my home. He wants to celebrate his new life on my marble floors. Approve it." I sat back in my chair and picked up my pen to confirm the internal file. Back when I was with Jordan, everyone called me Valerie Fields. When the relationship imploded, I dropped his name, took back my maiden name of Sterling, and built a massive brand around it. "One last thing, Sarah," I added as she reached the door. "List me as the hidden operational supervisor. I do not want my name on any guest documents." 2 weeks later, the couple arrived for their initial site walkthrough. I made sure I was nowhere near the front desk when their car pulled up. Instead, I stood in the main ballroom wearing a plain staff uniform consisting of black slacks, a button-down shirt, and a simple name tag that read Valerie. No titles, no indication of ownership, just another employee working the floor. The heavy double doors swung open and the couple walked in. Jordan looked virtually identical, possessing the kind of features that age like an expensive politician. Silver hair at his temples, a sharp jawline, and a tailor-made suit that cost more than my first vehicle. He was glued to his phone, ignoring everything around him. Then there was Astrid. If Jordan represented corporate greed, Astrid was a walking advertisement for loud, unearned luxury. She was small, blonde, and possessed an aggressive energy that completely drained the room. She was wearing massive designer sunglasses indoors in a windowless room. "This space looks dramatically smaller than the digital rendering," Astrid complained, her voice bouncing off the high ceilings. Sarah led the walkthrough with a practiced, seamless smile. "Actually, Miss Vance, this hall holds 400 guests comfortably. For your party size, it will offer a very open atmosphere." "I do not want an open atmosphere," Astrid snapped, pulling her glasses down to reveal cold, calculating eyes. "I want an intimate setting that looks outrageously expensive. Jordan, put that phone away right now." Jordan barely glanced up from his screen. "Honey, these are my primary investors calling about our third quarter projections." "I do not care about projections when my floral arrangements might look cheap," she fired back without hesitating. I stood near the service entrance holding my breath. Jordan looked exhausted, carrying the heavy strain of a man who realized his expensive new life came with unbearable hidden costs. Sarah subtly pointed in my direction to keep the tour moving smoothly. "This is Valerie from our floor management team. She will be handling your physical layout." Jordan's eyes drifted right over me. This was the moment of truth. The moment where he might recognize the woman he lived with for 6 long years. The woman whose finances he destroyed. His eyes swept past me as if I were nothing more than a piece of decorative furniture. There was zero recognition, zero pause, and zero emotion. I had cut my hair into a short dark style and wore thick glasses, but being completely invisible still stung. Yet, that invisibility was my greatest advantage. If he did not recognize me, he could not prepare for what was coming. "Whatever," Astrid said, dismissing me instantly. "Valerie, I want the head table elevated on a massive riser so we are looking down on everyone else." "Is that clear?" "We can certainly prepare a raised platform," I answered, dropping my tone into a soft, subservient cadence. "Good," Astrid said. "And these wall drapes are hideously dark. I want them removed and replaced with light silk." "Those drapes are integrated into the acoustic balance of the building," I said flatly. "Removing them will destroy the audio quality for your live band." Astrid blinked, clearly annoyed that a staff member had offered actual information. "Fine, just cover them in expensive flowers then," she muttered. She turned away and walked toward a young banquet assistant who was setting up a demonstration table. "Why is this specific fork sitting here?" Astrid barked at the young man. He stammered nervously, explaining it was intended for the salad course. "It looks messy," she claimed, grabbing the heavy silver utensil and tossing it onto the table with a loud clatter. "Take it away. Our guests can use one fork for everything. It is far more efficient that way." I felt a surge of genuine anger. This was no longer just about etiquette, it was about basic human respect. "Actually, I said, stepping forward calmly. "A multi-course dinner requires proper utensils to maintain service timing." Astrid whipped around, staring at me like a servant who had spoken out of turn. "I did not ask for your commentary," she snapped bitterly. "You are paid to arrange tables, not lecture me on silverware," Astrid spat. "Right, Jordan?" Jordan finally looked up from his phone, clearly eager to avoid an argument with his bride. "Just follow her instructions," he told me with a dismissive wave. "We are paying a fortune for this venue, aren't we?" There it was, that familiar arrogance assuming money granted permission to degrade people. "Of course, Mr. Fields," I replied, my tone smooth and hollow. I watched them for the rest of the afternoon. Astrid was deeply insecure, masking her fear with cruelty, while Jordan was entirely disengaged, using his wallet to solve problems. They were a total disaster waiting for a spark. As they headed out, Astrid pointed out a faint smudge on the main glass entry doors. "Absolutely filthy," she sneered loudly. "If I see a single mark on my wedding day, I'm demanding a massive discount." "We aim for perfection," Sarah offered gently. "Try aiming much harder," Astrid fired back as Jordan held the door for her like an obedient assistant. As their limousine pulled away from the curb, Sarah turned to me, her face flushed with anger. "I genuinely despise those people," Sarah admitted. "Can we hit them with extra service fees?" "Oh, we are going to handle this much better than extra fees," I said, shedding the meek persona instantly. I pulled out my phone and dialed my lead attorney. "David, I need you to review the Apex Synergies documentation and prepare an immediate enforcement notice based on our commercial misconduct provisions." The following morning, I met with my attorney in his office on the upper level. David had the corporate files spread across his desk. "You are walking a very tight line here, Val," David warned, looking over his reading glasses. "Clause 14 is clear, but they could argue the corporate entity was merely sponsoring the event on behalf of an executive. It is a gray area." "Jordan does not operate in gray areas. He operates in fraud," I countered. "Look closely at the corporate authorization signature on the primary wire transfer." David zoomed in on the document. The signature belonged to Tracy Miller, Jordan's chief financial officer, who had also been his secret mistress during the final year of our engagement. He was funneling corporate funds into a personal wedding. "He is committing corporate tax fraud while simultaneously violating our business rate policies," I explained. "He booked this under a corporate umbrella to save 20% on the venue fees." David let out a soft whistle. "He definitely cheated you on the contract pricing." "He cheated me out of years of my life," I replied quietly. "So do we kill the event right now?" "If we cancel today, he spins the narrative," I told David. "He tells everyone that a bitter vendor ruined his special day. I become the villain and he gets to play the victim. I need a violation to happen live on our property. I need him to break our conduct rules in front of an entire room full of witnesses before I shut him down." On the afternoon of the wedding, the grand ballroom was completely transformed. Cascades of white orchids hung from the ceiling and soft golden lighting filled the space. A 12-piece band played smooth jazz in the corner. I wore an elegant dark suit that allowed me to look authoritative while remaining entirely unremarkable to the wealthy guests flooding through the doors. Jordan was standing near a massive ice sculpture, drinking heavily and talking far too loudly to his business associates. He looked flushed and thoroughly stressed. Astrid looked striking in her gown, though she moved through the room like an inspector looking for errors rather than a happy bride. She was not smiling, she was barking orders at the photography crew. By 7 in the evening, dinner service began. A high-end event requires precise coordination, where a single mistake can ruin the momentum. I noticed Maria, one of our senior housekeepers who had stepped in to help the serving staff, carefully navigating the floor with a large tray of empty champagne glasses. Astrid turned sharply, her massive dress sweeping right into Maria's path. Maria stopped instantly, holding the heavy tray perfectly still. "Excuse me," Maria said softly. Astrid looked down at her dress, which was completely untouched, but reacted as if she had been attacked. "Watch where you are going," Astrid shrieked, her voice cutting directly through the music. "You almost ruined a designer dress with your gross incompetence." "I am so sorry," Maria offered quietly. "Don't be sorry, be capable," Astrid spat. I took a step forward, my fists clenching, but forced myself to wait. Jordan walked over, resting a hand on Astrid's shoulder. "Honey, calm down, it is fine." "It is not fine, Jordan," Astrid declared loudly. "The staff here are completely useless. It feels like an absolute infestation of low-class help." An infestation. That single word burned through me. This was no longer about my past history with Jordan, this was about the hard-working people who built my company. I walked over to a nearby table occupied by Jordan's corporate associates, sitting down casually in an empty seat to watch the main floor. A waiter passed by, and I took a small appetizer from a tray to inspect the service quality. Astrid marched straight toward my table, noticing me eating. She clearly did not recognize me from our previous meeting. She simply saw a person in a dark suit sitting down near the guests. She walked right up and snatched the small plate directly out of my hand. "Staff members eat in the kitchen," Astrid announced loudly, ensuring the entire table heard her. The table went dead silent. Jordan stepped closer, staring at me. For a split second, I saw a flicker of confusion cross his face, as if a distant memory was trying to surface, but he quickly dismissed it. "Astrid, let it go," Jordan muttered weakly. Astrid glared down at me. "Do your job and get out of the main room. You are ruining the entire atmosphere." She handed the plate to a passing server with disgust. "Throw this trash away," she ordered. I sat there in complete silence for 3 long seconds. I remembered the endless nights, the crippling debt, and the agonizing work it took to build this sanctuary of hospitality. And now this woman was standing on my floor, demanding my staff eat like second-class citizens in their own workplace. I did not scream. I did not cause a commotion. I simply stood up, adjusted my jacket, and folded my napkin neatly on the table. I looked Jordan dead in the eyes, watching him shrink under my steady gaze. "If you want the staff to eat in the kitchen," I thought to myself, "then you can experience what happens when the entire operation disappears." I turned and walked calmly toward the kitchen doors. Sarah was standing near the entrance, her face pale with shock after witnessing the interaction. "Valerie, are you okay?" she whispered nervously. "Sarah," I said, keeping my voice terrifyingly quiet. "Execute Protocol 0 immediately." "Protocol 0? Sarah gasped. "But that is reserved for extreme emergencies." "This is an emergency," I said, pushing the double doors open into the kitchen. The kitchen was a chaotic blast of heat, clattering pans, and rushing chefs. I stepped into the center of the room and raised my hand. "Everyone stop what you are doing right now," I announced clearly. It was not a shout, but the absolute authority in my voice brought the room to a dead halt. "Turn off the burners," I commanded. "Put down your utensils. We are closing service for the night." The head chef stepped forward, looking entirely bewildered. "Boss, the main course is almost ready to go out." "The main course is officially cancelled," I stated. "The bride wants the staff in the kitchen, so we are going to enjoy our evening right here." I pulled a high-end bottle of champagne from the cooler, popped the cork, and took a drink straight from the bottle. "You all have 15 minutes to clean your stations and head home," I told the crew. "We are shutting this entire property down right now." A strange, heavy silence fell over the kitchen as the exhaust hoods were turned off one by one. David stepped through the back entrance, holding a thick legal folder in his hands. "Is it done?" he asked softly. "It is done," I replied, wiping my lip. "Deliver the immediate breach notice to the groom. Clause 14 for corporate misrepresentation, combined with direct verbal harassment of staff. Evict the entire party from the premises effective immediately." David nodded, a subtle grin appearing on his face as he adjusted his suit jacket and walked toward the main dining room. I stood near the kitchen doors, watching through the small glass window as David approached the head table. Jordan took the legal paper, his face turning pale as he scanned the official seals. He looked up, searching the room in sheer panic, before his eyes finally landed on me standing in the doorway. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The sudden recognition washed over his face as he connected Valerie Sterling, the powerful owner of the resort, to the woman whose life he had ruined years ago. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Astrid began screaming in frustration as the house lights turned on full brightness and security personnel stepped forward to escort the confused guests toward the exit doors. They had spent over $100,000 for a corporate disguise, only to end up standing in a lit parking lot with no dinner, no service, and no way to repair their reputation. I took another slow sip of champagne, feeling the heavy weight of the past 5 years completely lift from my shoulders. Building an empire out of nothing was hard work, but watching it deliver complete justice was worth every single second.